my world became smaller and smaller and smaller until I ended up living in a box.
In a box?
I lived in a shielded room. The same person that was helping us to shield found the right material to hold back the particular frequency that was coming in and burning my skin, and we built a room. You could not see through it. It looks like aluminum foil, but it's not. It's 3 layers thick, and it's got like a very, very fine chicken wire in the middle of it. There were days that I didn't know if the sun came up or the sun went down, and I couldn't run electricity in there, so I didn't have light. I had, I shouldn't say I didn't have light. I could intermittently use a flashlight.
When Christmas came around, we had Christmas inside the silver room, as we like to call it, which, you know, depending on how you look at it, could have been really sad, but we made the best of it. But it was still, you know, you don't want, you know, your mom to be in constant pain.
Having Christmas in here meant a lot to all of us, because there were so many events, so many school events, so many things that my wife could not do. She even missed our daughter's graduation from college. It was 3-4 hours away. She couldn't take the drive, and she couldn't stay overnight. Living in a shielded room or living in her car during the day somewhere in the neighborhood where it's safe. And, you know, it's the kind of thing you don't really tell people because, 1, they'll think you're crazy. 2, they definitely won't understand. And it's, why bother?
So for the last, how many years has it been? I think for the last, 4 years now, I spent a minimum of $10,000 each year. In a couple of years, I spent $20,000 just in going from one practitioner to another, and supplements and treatments. So it's like most of my savings has been put toward trying to figure out what was wrong with me and gain my health back.
PD Theater Company, this is Ezekiel.
1,861. 1,610. 1,600.
You don't look so good. You know, I see more and more people who are sick from electromagnetic pollution. Do you know what I mean? Take a seat. This is a corded phone. It uses a cord so that we can hear the voice. This is a cordless phone. It uses waves that we can't see so that we can hear the voice. And if we would see those waves, we would see something like this. And if we would hear those waves, we would hear something like this. And many machines are using waves. There's Wi-Fi. There is Bluetooth. Antennas. And those waves disturb the body.
Can you tell please about your connection to electrosensitivity?
I'm going to cry. Okay. So.
You start off with the crying and then we'll move on from there.
Yeah. So then you can't. Okay. So
Gottlieb became electrosensitive I think it was 2010. We didn't figure that out until, what was ailing her until 2012 or so. So there was 2 to 3 years of just really intense sort of a health crisis ongoing. Yeah, in 2010, I was doing a show, one of our performances in Boston, and she was with Ezekiel at my mother's apartment in Boston at the time. And she, became very dizzy and nauseous and went to the emergency room and was diagnosed with a possible virus. But the dizziness actually never left. She was basically continually dizzy until about 2012, along with a lot of other really unpleasant symptoms.
Overnight, it started around 10 o'clock at night. It was just like a bam. Everything felt here in my solar plexus, my stomach, as if everything just got stuck and stopped. And it was this strange, metallic, poisonous taste, not only in my mouth, but it was in my whole body. And at the time, I had no idea what that was, but it's the same sensation I get now when I'm in really strong Wi-Fi, which is almost everywhere now in the world. But some places are worse than others. When I'm in a crowd of people that are using a lot of cell phones or Wi-Fi, it gets much more intense. So it's the same feeling. You feel pins and needles in your head, a metallic bar in the forehead, and it's a kind of nausea that you can't describe. It's not the kind of nausea I used to feel when I was well, like if I got sick from food or the flu or something. It's a kind of poisonous nausea that's impossible to describe, and it'd feel like throwing up or going to the bathroom, but nothing would come out. It felt like my body's detoxification mechanisms just shut down, and as if this poison got inside me that could never come out.
When I'm around wireless, I feel prickly all over my skin. My skin gets prickly. Prickly sounds like a cute word, prickle, tickle. No, it's really quite painful. All of these simple symptoms are painful. When I'm around a very strong magnetic field, oh my God, I feel it in my head. It's like a real hard pressure. When I'm around dirty electricity, my skin burns. It's like this burning. It's like it's being cooked. It really feels like it's burning.
Just all sorts of, just muscle weakness, like just feeling a little foggy and kind of, the room is spinning. And, I remember at the worst of it, how are you supposed to live if everything around you is spinning all the time? Like, I don't even know how she did it for so many years. We were out one time. My brother was getting his Eagle Scout award, and so we went out, and someone was texting someone behind her, and she knew exactly what was happening based on where it was.
Well, there are a variety of studies that have been done, and it's worth sort of looking back at them. During the Cold War days, when radar was just beginning to be used, there were a number of reports that have been published where military people involved in radar work got in the radar beam and got an excessive exposure. And there's some 10 or 12 reports of individuals perfectly healthy before that sudden exposure. After that exposure, suffered from constant headaches, from photophobia. They couldn't stand to be in the presence of light. They felt their brain wasn't working right. It's classic electrohypersensitivity.
Some people say some people are genetically predisposed to be more sensitive to toxins. Other people say no, the people just get hit really hard with an overexposure, either suddenly or cumulatively over time, so they get sick. So I guess the verdict is still out on that one. But a lot of the people that do have this have a certain gene. It means they're slow detoxifiers, so they don't detoxify things as quickly as other people.
Electromagnetic fields are a natural part of the environment. We've all grown and evolved within the Earth's natural protective cradle of electromagnetic fields. 10 hertz frequency pulsations emanate from the core of the Earth constantly. That's right where human conscious thought occurs. We're in tremendous harmony, as are all species, with background electromagnetic fields. What we've done with technology is introduce signaling characteristics that don't exist in nature, power density exposures that do not exist naturally at the surface of the Earth, signaling characteristics like sawtooth and sine wave and other forms of pulsations that do not exist in nature. There's no corollary in biology that understands how to interpret this or adjust to this.
See, they used to think that non-ionizing radiation is safe. So that's why some of our safety standards are based only on thermal heating, right? But there's so much science now, it's like over 10,000 studies by now, showing that non-ionizing radiation, it has bioeffects on plants, animals, people. The science does point that it does have harmful health effects. Even the US government study they recently put out, the NTP project or program, showed that the rats that were exposed to the cell phone levels of what we're exposed to now had way higher rates of cancer, and the rats that were unexposed didn't even get cancer. That study, which was a 14-year study, corroborated a lot of the epidemiology studies that have been done on humans. So there were some people that had been really skeptical up until that point, till they saw that study. They said it's really hard to deny that it's a definite cancer risk at this point. So, and of course, the World Health Organization had said it was a class 2B carcinogen back in 2011, meaning like lead and asbestos. But a lot of scientists are showing that it's actually a much more serious cancer risk than even what the World Health Organization had said.
My name is Michael Holstein, and I'm the business manager for the Green Bank Observatory here in Green Bank, West Virginia. I'm here because the Green Bank Observatory is a facility to study radio waves from space. But because those radio waves are so weak, and we're talking about, as a comparison, the energy given off by a single snowflake hitting the ground is much more powerful than the radio wave that the astronomer is trying to receive. So Green Bank, the observatory is here in this very rural area, in a very rural county within the state of West Virginia called Pocahontas County, because there wasn't a lot of people here. There wasn't a lot of man-made interference. In 1958, the federal government created the National Radio Quiet Zone. It's the only one like it in the world. But it protects us against fixed-base licensed transmitters, so things like radio towers or TV towers or radar installations that broadcast. And of course, in the 50s, when they were created, there wasn't a lot out there. But in the last 15, 20 years, wireless technology has just simply exploded. And so the quiet zones also protect against interference from cell phones. So in this area, you don't have cell service. People don't have a lot of the technologies that exist elsewhere. And for that reason, people with electromagnetic hypersensitivity have found that Green Bank has sort of become a focal point for their lives.
Hi, Jen.
What is Green Bank?
What is Green Bank? What is Green Bank? I saw an Eastern European doctor in New York City, and he's kind of a big shot in the alternative medicine field. And he knew all about electromagnetic sensitivity, had protocols to treat it as such. So I asked him, do you know where Green Bank is? Do you know what happens in Green Bank? And in his accent, he went, what is Green Bank? What is Green Bank? So, like it was a thing. So Jennifer loves that story. Where to start? So about when I was 25, I was living in London in the UK. I was doing a PhD, I was doing some consulting. I was kind of a semi-type A kind of character, successful in life. Pretty much overnight, I was at a conference, I was staying with a friend, and I had a fever episode, and my life changed dramatically in the weeks that followed. I had to basically tell the school I wasn't coming back. I had to hand over my work assignments. I said, I'm going to take, a 3-month break, and, I'm sick, so the doctor's going to help me. I'm going to get better. That's what you think. We did a bunch of tests. Nothing really extremely out of range. I had a thyroid issue. The doctor said, take this medication. 6 weeks later, you'll be fine. 6 weeks, 6 months went by. Nothing happened. kept going from doctor to doctor to doctor. I had extreme fatigue. I could hardly get out of bed. I was unable to leave the house. Remember that I'm a trained researcher. I couldn't write. I was basically not functioning as a social and productive human being.
Oh, Leo, does this work? Does this help? And why do you have that?
This is something called a veil shield. It intercepts magnetic fields and also the glare from the computer. There's a consultant in Hawaii who's an electrical engineer who's also extremely sensitive. And yeah, you know who I'm talking about. And he suggested I could use it in that way. And it also, if you can also ground that. Jennifer, we remember I had grounded every single piece of metal inside this place, just because metal acts as pretty much like a magnet whenever there's frequencies around, and grounding it kind of drains some of that into the earth.
This wall here is the other side of the room where my wife slept and stayed most of the day. If you're going to use a shielded, this kind of shielding, it must be grounded. There's a grounding wire connecting to it right here. And we have it going outside the window, right here. And right outside in the yard is a grounding rod.
The Earth is, if you think about it, the Earth is a giant dipole magnet with a north and a south pole. Everything that has evolved in nature has evolved in harmony with background electromagnetic fields. Now, that when I say everything, I really mean everything. It's not just us, it's other species as well. We are entrained with the Earth's natural fields. Entrainment is a phenomenon that happens, think of it the way when a mother and a child sleep together and their breathing rates synchronize. That's classic entrainment. We are entrained with the Earth's natural fields. It's the introduction of these new exposures that has disrupted that entrainment to the point where Robert O. Becker, who was one of they called him the father of modern biophysics. He was my mentor in this subject. Robert Becker was. Robert Becker used to call it breathing with the earth. With the introduction of these frequencies, we can no longer breathe with the earth, which is interesting. It has the ability to affect all of our circadian rhythms, which are sleeping-waking cycles, our hormonal levels, our seasonal changes that happen not just in us but in other species, birds and butterflies, insects. Use the Earth's natural fields for migratory activities, for mating activities. So the effects that we're having at the Earth's surface with these exposures is a serious environmental toxin. This is a form of energetic air pollution, and people need to understand it as such.
Already here?
Yeah, so this is my spot. This is where I come to recoup. Sometimes I come for 48 hours straight. And when I'm here, I feel the same way I used to feel in the 70s and 80s. I feel completely normal. Every single symptom is completely gone. But you'd be surprised how many forests are no longer refuge. And it is affecting the trees. There's a lot of documentation on that. And when I'm walking in those forests, there's absolutely no relief at all. It's worse than parts of New York City. For example, I went to a beautiful, beautiful state park in Florida. And the town was quite good, in terms of EMR, meaning electromagnetic radiation. But the park, I was just dying. Tortures, pins and needles going into your head and your body. So as I was leaving, I didn't stay long. It was a beautiful park. I asked the ranger, or the lady at the, center, I said, do you by any chance have Wi-Fi here? And she said, oh, no, we have a Zigbee wireless system, for tracking everything. And I said, oh, thank you. It feels so good. I can't put into words how it feels, but it just feels like, yes, this is how it should be. It's as if my body knows. This is how it should be. And it's been like this for thousands of years.
you think humanity could ever give up cell phones or Wi-Fi? Yeah, I know it's so easy to get used to comfort because it is comfortable, right? So, but then to give it up.
That's an extremely interesting question, an interesting concept, because, and I'll go back 15 years. 15 years ago, we wouldn't even be having that discussion because it didn't exist, and no one knew that they were missing out on anything. The extremely quick influx of wireless devices into people's lives has almost just taken over. It is a convenience. That's what it is, you know, a comfort, a convenience. And it's interesting to watch people from outside of this area come into the area for even a short period of time and feel the burden of constant connectivity being relieved from them. You know, they enjoy the fact that they're not constantly being pinged by their cell phone, you know, or their email or Facebook or whatever it might be. We don't have that issue here. I haven't spent the last 15 years being addicted to it and then having to withdraw from it. I just don't have it. And generally find it quite rude when I go elsewhere and people are constantly on that instead of interacting socially.
This is a RF meter. This will pick up radio frequency microwave. So I wanted to show you that the background level here is 3.6 millivolts per meter. Just to give you an example, most suburban areas probably have a background level of about 400, maybe in certain hotspots you could be several thousand. The background level of certain kiosks that are going up in Manhattan, there's 7,500 wireless kiosks that are being positioned throughout the 5 boroughs, and the background level right now is 20,000 microwatts.
When the trains go by, I'm guessing some of it's, you know, from the train, and also everyone's using their phone. There's Wi-Fi and cell service in all of the stations now, including this one. So it jumps up to 600. I saw 1,000. You know, keeps jumping around when the subway comes by.
So this is my cabin. I built this part later. I did all of this myself. And then this other one I had built a few years before. I got a little help on that. And I built it on skids so I can move it. I've already moved it twice. And this is my little wood stove and a bed.
Can you tell us what's your profession? What did you do before you were?
I'm an architect. I'm a registered architect. So I worked all over the world. I worked many years in Nepal, and then I was working in Hawaii for 7 years before I got sick. And in the middle of it, my husband and I went to Nepal, thinking maybe we'll get a better doctor there who can still diagnose, because where I was in the States, they just did all these tests, but no one could diagnose. So we went there, but of course they had cell phones already there too. Of course, I didn't know at the time what was going on. But I remember, you know, being on a cordless phone once and saying, gee, my symptoms are getting worse. Could this have something to do with the phone? And I remember thinking, oh, Jennifer, that's insanity. This, you know, electricity cannot make you sick. But I kept noticing I couldn't be on the computer anymore. I couldn't watch television. I couldn't do, you know, a lot of electronic things. But there was so many things I couldn't do. I didn't realize it was how related to the EMFs this all really was. It slowly started to hit me because I realized that when I'd have these, I'd call them attacks. They were like physical attacks. And later I realized that these were times when people were probably turning on their cell phones and when the Wi-Fi was upping. And this is a book on people that have gotten ill from EMR. See, this man is electrosensitive. He made his own cord for the phone. I'm so sensitive to phones, even the cord doesn't work for me. Even when the phone goes on in some of these areas, I feel sick.
You know, Catherine, I remember it was Laura's birthday. Yes. And then perhaps come over to your house? When is a good time? This is measuring the phone, and this is connected to the phone. So you can see any copper wire, this would be wire inside. This is the same phone line that goes all the way down the poles, comes into the house. It's an analog landline phone, but it's still too hard for someone with electrosensitivity. We have to make modifications. Here, you'll get the magnetic field. Now, on this side, it stops. Why does it stop? Because there's no wire in here. This is an air tube. All it is a tube. The reason I have a pen attached is because I was holding this, and I was going, my fingers would start to tingle and get numb because of that magnetic field. So I just happened to use a plastic pen. And then here's the air tube, and I have no magnetic field. And this is a microphone, and I speak into the microphone. Sometimes I hold this, and sometimes I don't. And I can spend quite a long time on the phone this way. But I do have to hold this away.
Otherwise you can't speak on the phone, right?
No.
Sue eats alone a lot. I eat alone. But I think about her all the time. I think about her, what she's doing. If she's not home, I'm glad, because that means she's hopefully with some other people, doing something, having some fun. She has no social life here. Basically, is zero social life. I'm her social life. But in Green Bank, she's got friends. She goes to dinners. She has a social life in Green Bank. Here, she has nothing.
Do you ever get that feeling where it feels like an ice pick? Like right in the back of your head, like
yeah, something like that. Same type of thing.
I had the feet, I had the heart, same thing.
But the nerve pain was disturbing. That, I don't know. It's just crazy. Why should we have to live like this? You know, it's supposed to be first, do no harm, right?
Right.
If something hurts one person, we shouldn't be doing it. We're going down the wrong path. You know, we need to rethink this, regroup. I love technology. Let's make it safe. Let's back up and do this right. Because there's nothing wrong with having our toys or our progress, but why not do it so that nobody gets hurt? Or we're not hurting the environment, because this can't be good for the environment either if it's hurting us.
Children.
Children. What about the children and the animals that have no voice out there? They're suffering and nobody's really listening.
There are many other issues, and the one that is that I've been very much involved in has been electrohypersensitivity in children, which is reflected primarily by headaches, by a sense of having brain fog, of not being able to learn well. I'm presently involved in a legal case in Massachusetts of a 9-year-old child whose school refused to provide him with a room that was free of Wi-Fi, when he's present for several hours in rooms that have multiple routers and multiple wireless laptops. He develops severe headaches and often will develop nausea and even vomiting.
So when folks try to figure out what Wi-Fi looks like at school, most schools now have wireless access points that are connected to their routers, and they're put in either every classroom. Some classrooms have more than one, some do them in the hallways, but they continually emit a microwave radiation signal broadcasting their address. Whether there's even anybody in the classroom, it continues all day, all night. And so In this classroom, even though we have the sign hanging in our walls, we have not turned off the wireless access points. And so we see that the acoustometer is already going into the levels where we have thousands of studies all over the world showing biological effects. And that wireless access point up there just continues all day with our students in the schools.
I couldn't go to school at this day and age. I don't feel well just being in the building. I don't feel well in a lot of places, but in particular, I can really feel myself reacting here and just getting wiped out. I just saw a sign on one of the classrooms that said, nut allergy zone, no nuts. And it's sort of like this EHS issue has the potential to become very similar.
Right.
That.
But we can create white zones. We can create clear spaces where people who are sensitive don't get exposed. But we should really, as our world experts advise us to do, try and turn it off, because even if you don't feel it today, that cumulative effect on our system over the years can help you to develop things like Alzheimer's and autism coming onto the spectrum a little later in life. It could lead to heart problems. It could lead to brain cancers. These don't happen overnight, but on a continual deterioration of our system. And without the ability for our bodies to clear out those toxins every night, if we have Wi-Fi on at home, it impairs our body's ability to release melatonin to go in and clean up the damage from the day. And day after day, if we're sleeping with this light energy form on that is microwave radiation, our bodies simply can't catch up.
This is a song that the clown sings actually with the neighbors, because the neighbors are also having sleeping problems. The insomnia and sleep disturbance is one of the most common symptoms of wireless exposure.
It's a lullaby that explains that you can't sleep, actually. It's a lullaby to sleep, but you can't sleep.
Yes.
Sing a lullaby for me, 'cause I can't sleep. I'm so tired of counting sheep. A lullaby for me, 'cause I want sleep. The sheep are tired of jumping over me. A lullaby for me, I can't sleep. I'm so tired of counting sheep. A lullaby for me, I want sleep. The sheep are tired of jumping over me. It would be so sweet if I could just fall asleep. I'd have a beautiful dream. Sing a lullaby for me. These tuners, underneath this aluminum foil is a metal bar that's been zapped specifically with the frequency of natural light. When placed on electricity, there's, it's placed right next to these outgoing electric cables that then carry the electricity to our whole house. That electricity picks up this frequency that's in this device and creates a harmonic bubble out of our apartment using all the electricity that's in the walls anyway. So one analogy is sort of the wolf guarding the chickens instead of trying to eat them. It's harmonizing the electricity, so it actually takes care of dirty electricity issues as well as protecting from outside sources of microwave radiation.
This may look like a typical spare bedroom, but it's really anything but. What we have here is Y-Shield paint under the colored paint here, and Y-Shield paint is black. It contains graphite and it stops radio frequencies. Here I didn't find a very good solution for the windows. So I've had to, you know, jerry-rig this here. These panels are painted with Y-shield, and this is metal tape that blocks frequencies as well. And so I can't see out my window, and I can't have it open in here. The Y-shield paint had to be grounded by an electrician, and we have here the panel, the grinding panel. And what happens is he takes a grounding tape and runs it throughout the entire ceiling. It goes all the way around to ground this paint.
But now I feel good in general, and if I go out, maybe the first symptoms that I would have is like agitation, trouble thinking, trouble talking, you know, saying wrong words, and then if it gets really bad, after a while I get dizzy, and then I would have insomnia, spasm when I fall asleep, and then insomnia, and I think it's also troubling my digestive system.
Okay, that's one of the first things I do when I walk in the house. Turn the refrigerator off. I keep the food packed in a freezer with some gallons of water that will freeze, and I keep everything in here so it's sort of like an ice chest. And you can notice my refrigerator is actually empty because I only keep it on when I go out. If I go out for an extended period of time, then I take all the food out of the freezer and put it in here so that it won't, you know, crystallize or freeze some of the things I don't want frozen. And that's it. I just keep it off until I go out tomorrow. I just keep the refrigerator off.
And just because you can't stand...
Oh my God, the motor drives me insane. It's just, the motor is very difficult to deal with. It creates a very, very high magnetic field.
There were many things we had to do here. These power lines along here were too close. And so I had to have them put underground. I had to have it trenched and put underground. And the wires you see here, those are just the phone and the fiber optics. So the power lines aren't close to the house any longer, and also the power lines that come to the house are underground. They were just too close, and it causes problems. And that's another thing I should tell you. It's so weird because this took a few years. I started having trouble with that, and then I noticed the towers were getting worse. It seemed like I was having more trouble. It was just weird. And for a while, I didn't even know there was other people having this trouble. Last January, here I'm in the place that's temporary, that's my, quote, safe zone, and I'm having trouble now with the refrigerator and the furnace. I never had trouble with those. Every time they kick on, I could feel them. And I had never had trouble with that before. So it's like it snowballs. It's like your cup fills, and then you start having trouble with everything. So I thought, my gosh, what am I going to do now? So I knew once I got here, because this came with an electric furnace. I thought, I'm not going to be able to use that. It'll fry me. So I thought, my boyfriend and I did research, and we found out that there was propane heaters that aren't run by electricity. And also we found a refrigerator that was just not run on electricity. It's just run on propane. And so I was able to get those and install them here.
These are notes from my wife. She's in Green Bank, West Virginia. And these are Valentine's notes. Just notes that she sends me in the mail. I love it. And I put them up here, of course. There's a picture of her and our kids. This is a picture of her and our kids when we were younger. And I like to look at them every day. It just helps keep me connected to her, even though we're 8 hours away.
And you go once in 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks, I drive down and I stay for either a short weekend or for longer, depending on my work. I have responsibilities here in New York. I still cannot just leave, up and leave.
You have to work, right?
I do have to work. And I'm not ready to retire yet. Oh, tired.
No, I won't be going back to South Carolina anytime soon. I do travel there every month to see my daughter. She's 14, so growing up fast. And of course she uses all these devices and thinks they're wonderful.
Do you explain her? Does she listen?
No. And the mother doesn't seem to be too concerned. So it's very difficult when you can't agree on things like this in a family. I'd like to get her a computer that's plugged in to the telephone lines and have her use that, but I haven't been able to get an agreement. Maybe turn the Wi-Fi off at night. But even on these small things, it's difficult to come to an agreement sometimes with your family.
So these are all the signatures, as you can see. They go on and on and on, from the international scientists' appeal to the UN, stating that the scientific evidence shows that all of the safety standards of most of the agencies in the world are inadequate. Basically, the appeal states that numerous scientific publications have shown that EMF affects living organisms at levels well below most international and national guidelines. Effects include increased cancer risk, cellular stress, increase in harmful free radicals, genetic damages, structural and functional changes of the reproductive system, learning and memory deficits, neurological disorders, and negative impacts on general well-being in humans. Damage goes well beyond the human race, as there is growing evidence of harmful effects to both animals and plant life. And it goes on.
One of the things that I find really interesting is to look at what other countries are doing when you have a question like this. And France has already taken some extraordinary action. I think after the European Union failed to take action, France decided to be more proactive. And so I believe they prohibit Wi-Fi in kindergartens and in the primary schools, or are restricting it. And then in the upper levels, recommending to turn on to download and then turn it off. But in any event, they're moving in that direction to reduce the exposures of children. And one of the things that was a little disconcerting for me on this journey was to find out how high the limits were in the United States compared to other countries.
Right. So like right here, Salzburg allows 0.1 microwatts per centimeter squared. So basically on a little, gram of tissue here, how much radiation is okay. They're working off of the biological levels. So they're working at where our science is telling us there's biological effects. Switzerland's at a 4, China's at a 6, Russia and Italy are at a 10. We're at 580. So we allow 580 microwatts per centimeter squared of radiation when we know the biological harm is way down here at 0.01.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people seem to think that...
And the FCC has not changed their guidelines. Those guidelines are 20 years old.
Yeah.
They were set in 1996 based on exposure from one device. So we don't even have any standards at all. These are just guidelines, and we certainly don't have anything that represents how we use technology today. One device is what our standards, our guidelines represent.
Yeah.
How does that compare to a classroom of 30 students where all 30 students have a cell phone and all 30 students are using some sort of a tablet or a laptop, and then you've got access points up on the ceiling. You might have a cell tower outside your school. Mm-hmm. You might have smart meters on the wall. We don't have any regulation around that, and we are just continually bathing our citizens in this microwave radiation. And now the industry, no sooner did the National Toxicology Program find DNA damaged brain and heart tumors than Tom Wheeler, who's our exiting FCC chairman, turned around and pushed to get 5G spectrum allowed. That's 5th generation technology that would put poles in our neighborhoods at street level with these antennas on it every 4 to 12 houses so that they can carry bigger quantities of data faster.
But and it's a fine line. You have to, you can't wrap it so much that it doesn't transmit out to the street, because then the water department would not be able to take a reading. Okay, so that's the water meter.
I can see your hand shaking a little bit. Is it bothering you holding it? Are you getting an electric field? Well, if it's bothering you to hold it, I would let it go, yeah, because you're right near the fuse box, too, so you've got the other field. But the problem, one of the problems is that this could be outside a child's bedroom. It could be at the headboard of somebody's bed, and it's just sort of indiscriminate where these are. And in theory, they use these electronic meters. They can detect leaks as well as use them for billing purposes, so that's one of the reasons why they want it transmitting all the time. But I know someone in this town who had a water dam, and she had a crew come, and they left the hose on, and it flooded her basement, and she never got any notification from the city that there was unusual water use going on in the house. So, you know, there was a sense that maybe a lot of this technology is going in, even all the systems aren't in place yet. It's also not being monitored for any adverse impacts.
It's an overuse of technology. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. I mean, this could be a mechanical meter. For the amount of time that they drive by to read it 4 times a year, it's just irradiating this, you know, the environment.
A lot of people like to use the word electrosmog. Very good analogy. But when we have cell towers on every big building, when we are going to put these 5G generators on every third light pole along every street, it is certainly electrosmog, and it's getting worse.
Right now we're outside the FCC building in Washington, D.C. And the reason we're here is that they're about to have an open meeting about 5G, and basically they're kind of deliberating about how to make it as easy and painless as possible for the telecom industry to install hundreds of thousands of mini cell towers, one for every other house everywhere, with no restrictions about where they can go. So basically turning like what is already a health crisis into just like a health nightmare.
We want technology, we just want it safe.
There are too many people that can no longer continue with their profession because they're just ill. Unfortunately, there is no known treatment that is guaranteed to work. There is also a very limited evidence for a blood test that would give you diagnosis of electrohypersensitivity. Our federal government has totally shut down all funding for this kind of research, and that's been the case for, 20 years.
Why there is no funding?
For a variety of reasons. We have a very aggressive telecommunications industry. They don't want research on this area. Our political system is so dependent on raising money for being elected if you're in Congress.
We are coherent electrical systems. When biological systems are exposed to these intensities, we don't really know what it is that is going to result from that.
So we don't, basically it comes to we don't know.
It's a giant experiment.
Yeah, and we don't know, and even if we have more scientific research and more labs working on it and more evidence that it's harmful for us, still we don't know how much harmful it can be, and because also everything is changing, right? So there is more and more technology appearing, and we don't know how it's going to affect us long term.
It's true.
So
it's a big gamble. It's a gamble in favor of allowing the safety margin to fall in the camp of the industries that are bringing us the technology. There is no precautionary approach to this, at least not in America.
There's so many people that are dealing with this right now. We're coming forward and speaking about it. For every person that comes forward to speak, there's got to be like 500 people that don't mention it at all, that don't say anything.
Even young people, you can imagine being, let's say, 35, and you have a career, and your career involves using your iPhone and your computer and things like that, being in an office. And perhaps you start getting headaches, you start getting fatigue. What do you want to believe that you're going to have to stop doing all this? I mean, that's how do you live? I mean, it must be frightening. It must be frightening.
Well, that's what even my daughter said to me. She goes, "Mom, what do you think what am I supposed to do? Pack up and move to West Virginia?" Right. And it just stopped me in my tracks, and I was like, "No, absolutely not."
Right. To good health and a safe environment. This is
yes, here.
I'll do that. Clink.
Say, who knows how long I've loved you?
Like the JFK of Turkey.
You know I love you still.
Will I wait a lonely lifetime? If you want me to, I will. So when at last I find you, your song will fill the air. Sing it loud so I can hear you. Make it easy to be near you.
I felt like I was being electrocuted in New York.
Yes, you were.
I literally felt like my body was completely wired.
You know, you
Like,
lived in your car or the silver room, the shielded room.
I know.
That's it.
I know.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. According to the rat studies, they exposed the rats. In 3 generations, there was total sterility. So some scientists, like Ole Johansson, say if we keep exposing ourselves to these levels, there could be total sterility in humans in 5 generations. So if that's true, we can just all go out like...